out three different interesting facts before everybody here. The first one is what was sort of presented in a study by Perry in 2013, which said that play-based learning environments where children have the opportunity to sort of explore, interact, be with others is actually very integral to the self-regulation and development of a child. The next data point which I want to present is something that we've heard about a lot, about India's demographic dividend, right? As one of the countries with the largest number of young demographic and a growing population, between 2005 to 2035, nearly quite a bit of is already gone, and the next decade is really becomes very important, where this dividend of consumer spending is going to increase by 25%, nearly 25%, which would mean that you will have a spending population which comes together because of healthy adults, college graduates, people in jobs, not just college graduates, people with skills and employable skills and employed. The third data point, which I really want to talk about, is through a series of assessments that Toy Bank has undertaken, including recently, which my company, Social Lens, is now sort of the partner, the data partner with Toy Bank in this, is that a behavioral change and the shift that has been observed and evidenced. Whether it is in attention span, whether it is in a reduction of sort of the angry, aggressive behavior that often stems from stresses that children go through. So 3 different data points, ladies and gentlemen, but really form the context of the universe of the play conversation, or at least part of the universe of the play conversation that we'd like to delve into. On that note, I really want to start with the first segment, and to warm up to that and for us to ease into this conversation. I really want to start with the current state of play. What does play mean? And what does play, more importantly, mean for India? We've seen so many instances, we've seen studies, we've seen a lot of it in the way the Western world is looking at it. How are we looking at it? What does it mean for us? And to really get the ball rolling and the conversation started, I do want to call Ratan, a long-term supporter, friend, champion of Toy Bank, a wonderful individual who has done many illustrious things, including the concept of designing of spaces. Ratan, my first question to you, therefore, is, what does really play mean for you, and what is the state of play, if one were to sort of ask you to throw open the conversation? Can't see Ratan.
Kelly, he just dropped off. Vijay,
Okay.
He's just going to join back. I think he has some internet issues.
Okay. And so while we wait for him, I am going to actually field this question to Deepika at Egg Step Foundation. Let's just start first by asking you, what do you feel is the state of play today?
Well, I think I want to start with saying, I could flip the question around and ask, what does play make you feel?
Okay.
I would truly invite everyone who's here in the audience to just put your messages on the chat to say, what does play make you feel? And while you're doing that, I'm just going to continue with my comments, because I think tapping into that essence of what it makes you feel is the foundation on which everything is built in terms of the importance of play. In this conversation on play on this panel, and the 90 odd people who are here are all adults. want to listen and hear about play and what play is about and why is it important. And I think the state of play in India is actually evidenced by that joining. The fact that people want to talk about play. We want to have a public conversation on the idea of play. So the state of play, I think, is moving in a much more positive direction and perhaps where it might have been before. But also, let me paint the picture top down, right? In the domain of learning, the NEP talks about the importance of play, particularly in the early years. The National Curriculum Framework Foundation Stage talks about the play as the approach to learning in the first 8 years of the child's life. So if you were looking for policy permissions for play, you have it. Okay, tick. That's the state of play. You don't need more permission than that. Okay. The second is the evidence in science and the value of play for every human being, child, with peekaboo as the starting point of conversation on play, to any game that an adult plays. And Binoy is here, and he is the sort of the work he does with Ultimate. Engaging with play and the lightness of play in the life cycle and journey is what you want to build for every child and every person. So there is enough scientific evidence to talk about how children learn to play the best in the early years. And I want to extend the idea of the early years to even up to the age of 8. Because if you think of the first and the second grade being more preschool-like than school-like, then you take advantage of the way the child's brain is working and employ tools of play to enable more teaching for the child. And classrooms are more fun. Essentially, as far as the state of play in India is concerned, if we were looking for policy, if we were looking for scientific
Sorry,
evidence.
Deepika, could you just give me a moment? Can I request the organizers to mute all other audience?
रजेबाजी माइक म्यूट करो तुम्हारा
Sorry about that, Deepika. Back to you.
No worries. No worries. It's fantastic that we have so many people and they're listening. It's really great. And if we were looking for science-based evidence, there's enough and more. We don't need to go searching for it. We just have to convert some of that into language that every day all of us embrace and understand, and convert them into actions in our lives. What is missing is two things. One, a cultural permission and mindset towards embracing play as a good thing for you.
Yes.
And with that permission comes behavior. And behaviors, if you're playing the role of a parent, there's a certain type of behavior. As a role, if you're playing the role as a caring adult, as a teacher, how to imbibe some of those practices into your day-to-day life in classroom and schooling and learning experiences. Those, the hows of it, there's a little bit of a struggle in that space. But because we have the policy framework set, because culturally we're starting to have these conversations and the importance is starting to set up, I think we're well on our way when you're having the how conversation. But the permissions come with in ways that I think that create barriers for children.
Mm.
The adult lens of play and the child lens of play is very different.
Yes.
And unless we embrace the child lens of play, our desire as adults to continue to be convinced about its value will diminish the value for the child. The voice, I say this because, when the International Day of Play was announced, with UNICEF, we did a campaign called the Hour of Free Play, opening up the idea. And what was astounding to me was the question of what is free play, right? In the way that adults engaged with it and the way children engage with it was astoundingly different. But to then become observant of that and to change and become childlike as an adult is really the need of the hour. And the second thing is the voices of children as they express what play means to them is very different from the way adults express what the play means to them. And And as part of the Bachpan Bana banner, we did a Voices of Play conference with children from across the country. And there's a ton of stuff they said, and I will repeat only one thing one child said. And she was from Tamil Nadu, and in a sort of an under-resourced environment. And what she said was this: I am small. When I play, I fall, I get hurt. And she said this in Tamil. And she said, when I get hurt, it's part of playing. Just because I get hurt, don't stop me from playing. I wish I could say it in Tamil, because the essence of that, when you hear it in language, which is much more, you heard it in a Hindi or a Marathi or Tamil, much better than how I translated it into English. But essentially, the state of play in India, permissions, you've got all of it, don't go looking for more. What we have to tap into is this essence. What the child is saying is, make space for me.
Right. Right. I see Ratan is back here, and just sort of flipping it to you, Ratan. What does play mean for you personally? And if you were to just, I think Deepika has sort of set the context, just sort of laying out what she sees as one of the two, three fundamental things about what play means. But would love to hear your thoughts on this.
So I'm sorry, I missed probably 3-5 minutes of what started off the conversation, because I just switched off. I don't know why. Technical bugs as usual. Having said this, I think, when I ask my granddaughters what they did in school, the question or the answer is very clear: just play. When you talk to them about, your 6-year-old, when you ask what did you do in school, first thing they talk about is we play. But and as parents or as grandparents, we're constantly trying to figure out, but you must have been taught something, damn it. There's lots of money that's being paid to this school to teach you something. And their first reaction is play. Having said this, I think one of I don't know what to call it, but this is something that goes across age, gender, caste, creed, religion. I mean, it's one continual and common factor. There's nothing else that can probably go across all these variants. Okay, play is probably by its nature inclusive. It makes huge sense, because you don't need to qualify to play. You don't need to have a companion to play. You can do it on your own. You can do it with 2 people. You can do it with 50 people. You can just have a good time. It's about the joy of being. It's about the joy of kissing the breeze. It's just something very different from anything else that is structured in our lives. The sad part also is when you talk to 8-year-olds about play, it's about structure. Go out and play, okay? Or come inside and play this game, or go and meet your friends to play cricket, or football, hockey, whatever it is. I mean, the minute it gets structured and it gets sort of defined, I think the nuance of play is lost. And it's more to me about playfulness. It's more to be about bringing that into the system, into everything we do. Okay, you can have a good time playing with finance. You can have a good time playing with the economy. You can have a good time. But if you keep the larger benefit of play, I think that makes complete sense to me.
Lovely. Yeah. Lovely. Thank you for that.
It's also something that's taken for granted.
Yeah.
You just take play for granted.
Yeah.
Because like I think Deepika was saying, or someone was saying earlier, that we need to make the time for play. I think if you look at play as a horizontal that goes across everything, then you don't need to make a specific slot for that.
Right.
I think that's where I'd look at it.
So Seema, I want to ask, you've been a long time champion, friend, supporter of Toy Bank. And I think before I ask more on the philanthropy aspect, I first want to start with really, your thoughts on play and the impact of play on sort of an overall wellness in society, right? Because well-being and wellness has come to center stage. Finally, people are recognizing and waking up to it, and that is across any age group. Uh, the significance and the impact of play on well-being. And then I really want to ask you about your own perspective. You know, you've been you're a philanthropist. Where does the philanthropy perspective on play also come about?
Thank you. First of all, I'd really like to thank all of you for including me. I feel very honoured to be here with all of you. For those of you who don't know me, I met Shweta more than 10 years ago when I was visiting Mumbai. And I have to say, her entire mindset was just something that remains embedded in my memory. You know, the day I met her, she talked about play, and she talked about the fact that young people didn't have access to play. And the reason it resonated with me hugely, my children are now 27 and 25, but you can imagine they were, in fact, much more than 10 years I've known Shweta, because I think my kids were about 8 at the time. And I am a huge advocate of children enjoying learning. So I think that we remember things better if we've enjoyed them. We have good memories of them. So, you know, I think play can be incorporated into all walks of our journey from a very young age right through to adulthood. And so for me, what Shweta was talking about made perfect sense. And my own children grew up with a lot of play. There is a massive focus on play in nursery schools here. I did something called the Montessori course when I had both my girls, because I wanted to understand how children developed, what made them learn, and what embedded learning. So for me, I think the big takeaway was that we're always learning, and your learning is developed and shaped by the environment that you are growing up in. So how can we mold that environment to support a child's development? And I think what play does is it gives you so many angles. It gives you the opportunity to build friendships. It gives you opportunities to communicate. It gives you opportunities to develop your skills. It teaches you to be resilient. It teaches you to understand where other people are coming from, because you've had opportunities to interact with them. So, I mean, I think the main thing for me is that I think building habits into a learning environment which make that environment fun and playful are things that we as adults should really focus on. In terms of philanthropy, I suppose that I obviously live in England, so I experience some of the cultural barriers to play when I talk to perhaps some of the older generation, but we don't experience them hugely here. I think the thing that strikes me when I come and visit a toy bank centre is the fact that they've created access to really often quite simple materials that otherwise just wouldn't be there. So, you know, I went into a school, I think in January this year, with Shweta, and brought my husband too. And the children had a game which we all knew, and I think it was, something like Monopoly. But the task they were given was not to play Monopoly, but it was to rewrite the rules of the game. And honestly, I found it challenging. It really made the children think. And for me, that opportunity to develop critical thinking skills, I think that's where philanthropy really needs to focus on what is it that play can do. Ruthan's right, play needs to be, it's about being playful, it's about the environment. It's about it being in every level of a person's development. But in terms of the practicality of it, what I'm interested in is what are the barriers? And, if the barriers are cultural, how do we address those? If the barriers are infrastructure, how do we address those? If the barriers are lack of awareness, how do we address those? All of these things obviously take resource. And so, people like me want to ask, well, where do you need that resource? Because there are many, many areas where we could provide resource as philanthropists, but what specifically do you think will move the needle? I guess that's my question back to everyone.
All right. Thank you, Seema. And I think you just brought up the point about, when you mentioned the point about critical thinking and so on. And I do know that, interesting data that studies at Toy Bank have shown where 30 hours of play have actually brought about a certain kind of improvement in critical thinking and so on. Just looking at the conscious play program and some of the recent data that we've seen, the critical thinking component has actually shown a 1.5 percentage improvement over baseline measurement for over 50% of the respondents that were part of this assessment. I'm bringing up another interesting data point, and Priya, I really want to sort of talk to you about this, the skills gap. Right? The fact that there's a skills gap, not just from a vocational perspective, but also on these elements of, whether it is critical thinking, it is, and we do know that communication, critical thinking, problem solving, all of these are going to be so much in requirement if we want to achieve that demographic dividend. Your work at Antarang, has focused so much on putting at risk adolescents, young adults back into the workforce. So play, well-rounded children, how can that really bring and make way for carrying it forward into their adolescent and teenage years and beyond? And then I know Swati is here. I'd like for her to be the second respondent after you on Swati, as someone who looks so much at arts, right? And arts is so integral to learning, to building those wonderful sort of resilience and qualities which Seema also mentioned, and where you see play in this. Over to you, Priya.
Thank you, Vijaya. Yeah, firstly, look at the world that our young people are inhabiting. All of us are inhabiting, and what our young people are inheriting from us, right? Jahan bhi dekho, there's a lot of strife. There's so much violence. There's just grief that's so much a part of today's world. So very critical skill that our young people do need today is that ability to be a little bit playful, a little bit collaborative, a little kind, and the ability to just listen to one another and reframe rules as you go along and not hold on to something that's really important, right? I think that's primarily being playful, adopting a playful way to look at everything, adopting a very playful stance to all the work that we do. I feel that's one of the most, I would say, sustained skills, or the most transferable skills that we can really instill in our young people and all of the adolescents that all of us work with and come in contact with. Second, really, what is the future of work? किसी को नहीं मालूम 10 साल बाद 20 साल बाद कैसे नौकरियां होने वाले हैं, and what are the kind of jobs that are going to be available, what skill sets are required. Nothing. We actually don't know, right? That's one big thing. Even though we work in this space of career awareness and readiness, it keeps us awake at night. What do you tell a 14-year-old ki 10 saal baad what's work going to look like? But all we know is that they need to be really adaptable. Whatever life throws at them, they need to be able to, improvise and make do with it and make their way around it. What better way to learn it than through art or music or play or just being, sort of just working with whatever it is required there, right? And nothing builds that as much as the playground, as much as you sort of playing with everything that you do have. So there's adaptability, the need for improvisation, the need to regulate yourself and your emotions, the ability to work with uncertainty because you don't know what outcomes are going to be there. You don't even know ki जिसके लिए हम पढ़ाई कर रहे हैं, whether that's going to be even useful or not, right? For 10 years down, we have no clue about any of that. So all of these very, very core skills, and especially that skill to learn as we go along, right? The what do you say? The ability to learn. It's just that learning how to learn is what play instills in young children. That's what is so critical. And while I'm here, I do have to say that because we work in high schools and we work in government high schools, right? And what we say is that the whole career skills need is part of the school curriculum. Now, a lot of states haven't figured out where to shove it into the timetable. So what they do is that, acha, wo PT period hai na, usko le lijiye aap. And that's the first thing to do. And we are like, no, that's not what we want to eat up, right? But you've actually allocated 160 hours for vocational training. Give us time from there, or give us time from social studies. It's fine, kids will learn that. But please don't take away the extremely valuable PT hours from a timetable. So I think it really is, like Deepika said, the mindset shift, really looking at play as a necessity.
Yes.
It's as necessary as eating or drinking or sleeping.
Wonderfully put. Swati, at the arts quotient, you use arts as the medium to sort of build leadership and, instilling all these qualities. I want to really get your thoughts around play, and there are a lot of studies. I have a sheet full of papers with all the studies that have been, which are really telling us. But what is it that we're seeing? And play means different things, right? We talk about sports-based play. The importance of indoor play is cannot be underscored. Ratan put it so beautifully to say that play is just play, outside, inside, anywhere. Just want to look at how play actually drives and building those skills which later come into play for individuals. Over to you.
So, just picking up from what Priya said, and Priya is really looking at young people entering the workforce. A lot of our work is working with senior leaders who are maybe 25 years into their careers. And I would say much of the same things remain true. It's so much that the paradigm of leadership historically has always been war, right? There's so much military terminology that we bring into this space of winning and conquering. And actually, the world that we live in requires leaders to have all the mindsets, the habits, that play enables, right? I think fundamentally, I see very senior leaders having to reinvent themselves.
Yeah.
They have, their industries have changed. They are being asked to do different things, and that mindset comes from that ability to play. It's like Ratan said, what is your attitude to whether you're doing finance or having to learn a new technology? Be playful about it. Be easy about it. That, there is a process. I will struggle with it. I'll get better at it. So one is the attitude you bring to anything you're learning, but also that you're building. Two, I think in this country where you will create jobs, but you will actually need many, many entrepreneurs. You've got to start first with imagination. Then you've got to be able to start with whatever you have available and build from there, right? And I think, again, that's what play enables. I mean, you look at little children, they can believe that a carton is a throne and tell stories around that. And that ability to look ahead, to know what is possible, I think is also a really, really useful thing. And the third thing I'd say is, just in the world we live in, whether you call it collaboration, whether you call it consideration for others, you have to be able to whether it is to lead or to work on a team, you have to be able to account for others and work effectively with others. Again, stuff that you learn in a playground, or I work a lot with the arts, and I watch puppeteers, and it might feel that puppetry is really about inanimate objects that everybody believes are alive and believe in the same thing. So it's not just what you do individually, but what you do collectively also is, I think, what play enables. And particularly in the world we live in, we've already talked about wellness and mental health. I mean, there is just so much stress. And therefore, for me, in leadership too, we've got to move away from this paradigm of war and conquering and just make it, playful, because play is serious. Kids play seriously. They take their rules seriously. They take getting ahead in whatever they have set up for themselves seriously. So play is not the same as being casual.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's maybe being informal. It's letting your imagination, your creativity be available to you, and being able to work with other people. I really think those are the attitudes of play. And also, I think being generous with yourself to say that I don't know something now, but I can learn it, right? To imagine a new avatar for yourself as kids do. I think that is what I think of play in the context of leadership.
I think very, very, very well put, Swati. I'd love to hear, it is intended to be a round table, though, even though on my screen we are all like rectangularly placed, but would love to hear a few more voices before I move into the other segment. So, Ratan, Seema, Deepika, in no particular order. We do have a few minutes before we move to the next segment, but I really want to hear from all of you just a little bit more. So please feel free to jump in.
I loved what Swati said. It's so true. I think it's the word play in itself. It's used in so many contexts. You play an instrument, you play a sport. There is an association with things that we enjoy and therefore are likely to do more of. I think it really develops curiosity. I think for me, possibly the single biggest thing that you need to develop as a human is curiosity, because that's how you're going to learn more about the world, the environment, finances, gardening, flower, whatever. If you're not curious, then how can you contribute more to your world? So I think play really does open up a lot of those facets without someone realizing that that's actually what's happening in the process. So I think somebody asked a question on the chat about how can we inculcate these sort of concepts with adults. We're all shaped by our own learning experiences. So we sometimes, I think, have to unlearn things we learned. And I think that's really hard. And how do we unlearn them? With forums like this, where we learn from other people, and I think the other thing is being very open-minded to the idea that there is another way. There are new ways to do things, and not necessarily the ways that we were brought up with, the times tables or that need. I mean, I grew up in the British education system. I had to get into A-level school, and I had to get through A-levels to get into university, and that was the focus of my years at age sort of 16, 17, and 18. Not a broad perspective. I regret that I didn't have 7 or 8 things that I could have been learning. I didn't know a thing about the economy when I was 16 or 17 because I was studying to be a dentist. So, very, very narrow focus. And I think that curiosity comes from play. I also actually grew up in Africa in an international school. So something that was very interesting for me was learning from lots of different cultures, their approach to being brought up. So, a German parent's approach to being brought up, an Indian parent's approach to being brought up. Really interesting being in an international school environment to have that exposure to, all of those different environments. And again, I think if I was going to just use one word that I think play does help you to develop, it's curiosity. And that means you're always going to keep learning. You're going to be interested in AI. You're going to be interested in, even though, as you said, we do not know what jobs our kids are going to be doing in the future or our grandchildren, building that curiosity means that they will take opportunities that otherwise they may have just been blinkered to.
It's very interesting, Seema, what you said, because I think a lot of the way our experiences around play have come and also come from the mindsets that our parents sort of brought with them, right? And everything was sort of compartmentalized. You had a compartmentalized life as a child. This is school time, this is homework time. And the one thing which always got crunched away was playtime. I just go back to 2 points. Shweta in many conversations she's brought this up, and just what Swati has said, where Shweta says that play is a concept that is agnostic of age. You want to be playful and carry that playful characteristic in you well into your adult years and through, even at 80, as Ratan must be with his grandchildren. And then Swati, to bring up a point that leadership has traditionally been primed because of wars. You were a leader because you led your country and you were fighting a war. Right through history, medieval and modern. But I think as the paradigms of leadership are changing, I think it all just boils down to how, as an individual, you know, these elements can actually transform just you as an individual. I must be doing a terrible job of presenting it because all of you speak so wonderfully well. I do want to move into really the third most important segment for all of us here and all of us listening, which is really, how do we, what needs to be done? And of course, Deepika started off saying that, hey, if you want the policy, if you want the law, if you want the permission, that's already there. I think that's what you said. I don't know if you used the word permission or consent to play, but you did mention that. But one of the things we do know, right? We have seen Article 31 has spoken about the right to play to being a universal right for all children. There are barriers. In the chat room, I see questions being asked that how do we make play more powerful? Is play something that needs to be enforced? And if you have from individual to government something which calls for systemic change, there are a lot of elements which go into it. There could be 500 things which need to be done. But really, I would like each one of you to give me at least 2, 3 things which you believe needs to be really advocated and actioned. In no particular order, I would love to hear from each one of you because I really think this is important for all civil society participants, be it individuals, institutions, capital providers, philanthropists, implementing organizations, and people, as all of us in our individual right in our personal and professional lives. So please, the floor is yours. Since everybody is waiting politely for the other, I'm just going to put together an order so that it makes it easy for you. We start with Deepika, we'll move to Seema, Swati, Priya, and Ratan. If I may, Ratan, with your kind and gracious permission, let the ladies go first. Yes, Deepika, over to you.
I think the number one thing, I think we start from each one of us as an individual to become an advocate of play. And what does an advocate of play means? It means different things in different places. In your apartment building, it means a certain thing because you may have to fight for the sake of the children. So that the playtime is not restricted from the 4 to 5:30 only. It may take on various shapes like that, but to be an advocate of play for every child means stepping into how to make your local parks more inclusive and becoming sustainable. It just remain as spaces for children and not taken away by adults. It happens. See, making space for play and being an advocate for play as every individual, much like how we segregate, we throw the plastic waste in the plastic bin and the wet waste in the wet bin. We wash our hands every day. Make space for play by doing and becoming an advocate for play wherever you are. At a very, very individual level, I think that is really one thing that has to happen. Secondly, I'd say expanding spaces for play and creating sort of expanding spaces for play is a critical aspect of it. Whether a public library opens itself up to become a play space for children versus the space that it was, which was quiet space for older people to come and read newspapers at a certain time. Today it doesn't, but expand spaces for children. Whether you are in a village, whether you are in a town, it's not only school, it's not only home.
Yeah.
Right. Become part of that conversation to expand spaces for children. That's the second thing. And thirdly, I think there is an aspect, play is very forgiving. It's very forgiving. You can make a mistake and come back. Sometimes it's in your head when you're creating something. And to unlock this value of that play in as many visual and real ways as possible, catalyze action that makes it visible. Culturally make it permissible so you see it. Whether it's in the form of, that's an important, for me, this is about a societal conversation. So all my 3 points are on societal conversations and cultural shifts that have to take place. And the other speakers will say about the rest of it, but I'm anchoring my 3 points on really societal conversations.
Yes. Thank you for that. Wow. Yes, Seema, over to you.
So I think there are a lot of people at this roundtable, and I would encourage each and every person who is either speaking or listening to think about what can you do as an individual. Things I've helped with, because that's where Shweta has suggested initially the help would be useful, is just funding direct support to provide children with access to play, whether it's toy libraries, whether it's buying the games or replenishing them. The other place that I think we've been helping in recently is the development of infrastructure. We obviously need to provide training, capacity building. So again, if any of you can help with that, I think that's important. Thirdly, if you have a grassroots organization and you can create play opportunities for local children, Toy Bank will have loads and loads of ideas and resources that you can use. So approach them to see how you can help within your own organizations. I would really like to see the impact. I'd like to see longitudinal studies on the impact of play on child development. I think that's important for convincing some people, who may not yet be convinced with that link between play and a child's well-being and health and so on. So let's produce the data. And when I say that, I know Toy Bank have a lot of data already. And then finally, if you're in a position to advocate for change, if you are working in local government, if you are working at a regional level, if you are working at a national level, and you are in this conversation, you're at this roundtable, then how can you bring about that change at local or regional or national or global level? So I think there are many, many facets, and I'm sure every single person on this roundtable is able to contribute something, within at least one of those parameters.
So I think just before I hand it over to Swati and the rest, I feel I'd love to your point about data and being able to actually see that. I think we're just very excited to note that Toy Bank has already begun on that. We're in a continuum of continuous sort of assessment, evaluation. What are the learnings we're getting? How are we plowing them back? What's really the data telling us, right? Because beyond the most powerful mission and the excellence of operations and the way this program is just growing, it's also now to be able to have a framework. Of course, I'll let Toy Bank speak more about it, but as their sort of data and evaluation partner, I think we're just on a very exciting space to see some of those numbers. And I think that some of those numbers was flashed on some of the slide on the presentation earlier. But more on that later from Trupti. And Swati, over to you, Priya, and then Ratan to sort of round off this conversation.
So fully in agreement in terms of the advocacy, doing the research, also, addressing culture. I guess I work with a lot of business organizations and corporates. And I think I want to pick up on something that Deepika said about extending the space to play. And I think we have to lobby organizations to do that. So a couple of years ago, when BKC was being built up, we wrote a proposal to say, we've built all these fancy lobbies. There are 7 schools in that neighborhood. Can we not once a month open every lobby to the school? right? And if you're worried that they will be destructive, let's do it around a theme. Let's say, children going out in the neighborhood and taking pictures of the trees. And putting them up, and you bring your employees, let them put it up, but really create these shared spaces of, that this is my expression, this is also space that is accessible to me. Why are we building these cloistered fortress spaces all the time? So I think it's not just in the, a child has a playground, and look, we can negotiate for as much space, but I think in the urban sprawl that is this country, that is harder and harder. And so how can we be creative, not just in public libraries, but claiming that in spaces that are private, that are formal, that this is also accessible and to children, because adults learn from just being able to see what they do in those spaces. So yeah, that's what I would add to what's already been said.
Yes. Thank you, Swati.
Yeah, really agree with everything that Deepika, Seema, and Swati have said. And what I would like to sort of add to that is that play becomes, like you rightly said, Vijaya, as well, right? Play always gets last priority as children grow into adolescence and then adulthood, because, as Seema also mentioned, it's work and getting into college and all of those priorities sort of take over. So I think really advocating for play hours, or that games hour, or music and stuff like that to continue to be in the school timetable, even in high school, is something that we've been advocating for and constantly pushing. It shouldn't end at primary school, but go on to middle school and definitely into high and higher secondary school. Colleges, there are very few colleges that have any room for play, right? Because, and even schools today, if you look at government schools, for example, just having spaces to play. I know Shala Siddhi talks about having a music room, a games room, having those times within the timetable for music and games, and and making sure that all of us who work with the education system, making sure that it is indeed happening. How much time would it take us to pop into while we're popping into a school to see, hey, is there a music room in the school? Is there a games room in the school? And we'd be surprised that a majority of them don't really have, even though it's on paper, like Deepika said, we have the permission for it and it's there as a must have, but who's really checking? And unless we do the advocacy for it and talk about it, it may not come into force at all. The second big stuff, right, a huge sort of plus 100 to what Swati said. One of the things that when employers ask us when they're hiring from us, what are some of the things that you think we can do to make it a safe space for young people? We always talk to them about having game nights, having just spaces marked out within your working hours itself for play. It's something that we take quite seriously at Antarang because it's a younger workforce and everyone is super competitive with different forms of board games. So there are game nights that happen quite naturally, but it also keeps the team talking to one another in a much more informal, open fashion and getting to know each other really, really well. And the other, sort of thing that I've been talking about to a lot of employers is, why is it that you always ask for qualifications and stuff like that? And then, no one really asks them seriously, but what do you do to unwind? What are your hobbies? How do you play? How many hours do you play? That's important because it tells you so much about the person that you're hiring, right? And imagine if this became a college essay question. How do you play? How many hours do you play? And what do you do during that playtime? It just then normalizes the conversation about being, just being accessible as a person and being so open to play.
Priya, you brought up something which is very poignant. For all the resumes that come our way and we look at hobbies, right? We never see play. You never see playing as a hobby. You say music, this, that, a bunch of other things. But yes, in the interest of time, conversations for another day. Ratan, over to you, please.
The sad part of it is that the minute you put an adjective or a prefix or an affix to a play, it changes its personality completely. So structured play, conscious play sports. I mean, the whole concept of play breaks down the minute you give it a performative sort of agenda. And that's the scary part because that's contradictory straight away. Okay, the minute you talk about performative play, you're playing to become a better adult, or you're playing to become a better person, or you're playing to do something, that you suddenly have the pressure of play rather than the joy of play. So that's a bit of a contradiction that I see in my space. The second thing is that, when we talk about governments and policies and, why doesn't India have as many, or why doesn't Bombay have play space? The problem is, or the fact is, that you have defined play areas. The problem is that the minute you have a defined play area, it tends to get populated by swings and slides and merry-go-rounds and stuff which kids don't need. Okay. And if you free fly, sort of free ball play, it's a much, much more attractive proposition. It's like, I'm going back again to my grandkids. When we buy them an expensive toy, that toy is like the joy of opening that box. The toy is put on the side and the box becomes the focus of everything else. Yeah. Because the toy that you gave them, let's say it's a doll or a car or a little soft toy, has a specific use and purpose. But the box that you got from that packaging, or anything that you got from that packaging, takes over different avatars, because the kid's imagination takes it into, this is my house, or this is my treasure chest, or we're going to be playing something else. So you play hide and seek through it. I mean, the minute you don't have a formality to the purpose or what you're giving, I think it makes beautiful sense, because like Seema says, curiosity is number one, and I'd say imagination is another. Okay, and everything else that comes in between. Because when you have no resource, you create that. You create your imagination. Two stones on the ground becomes whatever you want to do. An old tire from somewhere becomes whatever you have to make it. Rather than swings and slides. And this is the formal play area. Because the minute you have a formal play area, you sort of fence it in and you say it has to become a safe space. And then you populate it by saying, and now this is where the parents will sit. And the parents choose the best place to sit, when it actually may be the place where the kids should be playing. Stuff like that. So I'm just saying, the less you structure, the better it is.
Right. On that note, firstly, I think the last 60 minutes have allowed us to just touch upon a few things. And for that, I am extremely grateful to each one of you, Deepika, Seema, Swati, Priya, and Ratan. Thank you so much for in the time to touch upon a few critical elements. But really, I think if there's one thread that holds all of this together, it is the organization and the person behind the organization who brought us here. Before I sign off for a wonderful conversation, open-hearted conversation with all of you, I extend my heartfelt gratitude and thank you to all of you, and hand over the mic for the rest of the next segment to Shweta. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's already way past the time. I'm not going to take much time, but you have all said everything that I could have ever even thought about, all the points, anything that I've said. For me, this is like an interesting stepping stone now as an organization, as a cause that's been propagating play for the last 2 decades. We are celebrating our 20 years this year. We're doing this in the best possible way that we could think of. We are pushing for advocacy. We want the right to play to become a reality, for playful conversations and play to be normalized. This still is an audience that understands the value of play, and we're saying all the right things. We've experienced it and we feel it. But when we go sometimes to other people, especially when we talk to our kids who are growing up in the streets, or the teachers who have never had experience of anything that's remotely got to do with play, their lives have been so different. It's a completely different ball game. The kind of mindset changes that we have to work around when it comes to government officials. Talking about play is almost like, we'll see later. It's not important, not the priority. Many other things. Jobs are not happening. Employability skills are more important. All of these things come to us, thrown at us. But for me, like everything, the genesis of all the problems, the genesis of all the good things also, it starts from early childhood. Play plays a huge part in that. I'm reminded of this amazing movie called Life is Beautiful. If you haven't seen it, you should see it. It's this lovely kid who grows up in this Nazi camp and doesn't even realize it because his entire life in that camp is an imaginative play of what his father has done for him. And for me, that kind of depicts a lot of our own realities. We're all in some sort of a situation in our lives, and how are we perceiving and working around it? Like Ratan said earlier, and somebody very famous had also said, "What's work? It's serious play." If only we could imbibe and sort of embed the values of play on a day-to-day basis, no matter who you are, where you are, what your age is, what your circumstances is, that you come from. It's just important for us to stay playful. It brings us back to our elements. It keeps us honest and authentic. And those values go a long way because everybody around, especially our children, see and learn from this. And I truly am one of those that is very driven by the fact that if we can somewhere speak the language to whichever audience. The government needs the indicators, here they are. Somebody else needs, hey, what's the story? Give me some narratives here, hundreds and thousands of field stories. You want data points, play-based assessments, we built it out. You want structured play pedagogy in classroom, we've got it. Like every possible way of putting play out there to whichever audience, we are on it. And we are determined to build this world of play in India, to make the right to play a reality well within our lifetime. So conversations like this are very, very exciting. It pumps me up with even more energy and zest. So good luck to all of you, because there's going to be a lot of roundtables and a lot of discussions you're going to be a part of. There's a huge play conference at the end of this year that we're organizing. We're so excited about it. Anything and everything to do with play, you know where to come. And we'll tell you if you don't know how to work around and use play in whatever you do. So very grateful for the amazing insights and conversations you brought in. One last thing, at the start of this conversation, we had a poll. And all the questions were, what is play according to you? It was 40% for a necessity for building essential life skills in all children. It was 3% for a catalyst for transforming adulthood trajectories for at-risk children. For me, that 3 needs to get too close to 100. I think it's so important to shift, have that change in the mindsets, because I believe a lot of what we feel and experience in our early years is what shapes us as we grow up into young adults. And play does that for us. So I'm quite nothing more to say. Just very, very grateful to everybody here. And I don't know how many participants, there's even more on the YouTube. So grateful for people to even join the conversation. Tripti, over to you. I don't want to take more time.
Just before I hand it over to Trupti, there is, the audience have placed a couple of questions, but while we will find a way to circulate back all the responses to those questions, I do want to pick up one question which has come up, and Ratan, this is for you. Do you think there is a role for indigenous or native knowledge systems in thinking about and planning for children's play? I can't hear him. You're on mute.
I'm saying when we didn't have all the devices and all the toys we have today, it was indigenous, it was culture, it was community, it was self-generated, self-taught rules, etc., that really fashioned play and that really grew our grandparents or parents into the individuals that they became. There's a huge amount of indigenous knowledge. Okay, a huge amount of indigenous play that happens, and it's been happening over and over and over through culture, through civilization. I think there is huge space for that. The question is, do we need a specific playground to do that? The answer is absolutely not. You can do it anywhere. That's what I'm trying to establish, that the minute you put rules and the minute you draw a box and says, this is your play area, Okay, it just becomes exclusive, which is technically not inclusive.
Right.
It becomes such an exclusive space, nobody wants to go there. Everybody will hang around on the outsides and not go into the pit, if you know what I'm saying. And that's really what play is all about. I mean,
Got it. Thank you, Ratan. On that note, I think we just have a few minutes left on the clock. Tripti, over to you.
Thank you so much, Vijaya, and thank you so much, Deepika, Priya, Ratan, Seema, Swati. It's been very inspiring hearing such brilliant, amazing perspectives on play, and I hope that this conversation makes its way to, yes, our work at the Open Tree Foundation, but also to the context and the work of whoever is listening in. That we see this shining a light on the way people use play in their contexts. Just thank you to everybody for listening. There are a lot of questions in the chat box, and we'll find a way to respond to some of these questions. A few exciting updates coming up. We, like Shweta mentioned, we have a play summit, which is our seminar on play and child well-being. So we're going to drop a link for this in the chat box, and it's an interest form, and we'll get back to you with an invitation and more details on the conference. I just want to sort of close out this by saying that it's, for the last 4 years working at Toy Bank, the privilege of seeing children and what they're capable of doing. Every single moment observed when you see a child at play, it's the child's agency. And I think growing up in adversity also takes away the sense of agency from children. And this agency plays a part in everything that they do in life, really. And, it's astounding what children are capable of when they're given that space to think, to build, to create. It's not the work of intellect, but it's the play instinct that makes things happen. So yeah, I think that's going to be at the heart of our work, Shweta. Just having children at the heart of everything we do, evolving, and yeah, finding as many avenues for play as we can. Thank you so much, everyone. We look forward to your sign-ups for the Play Conference, and thank you to all of you wonderful speakers.
Thank you so much. It's really, really interesting.
Thank you, everybody.
Great to meet all of you.
Everyone.
lovely.
Bye.
Thank you. Leave the